Yeah, what's going on? I just wanted to go through. It's been a little while since I did a video. I just started a new job, dealt with COVID, all that good stuff. I even had a video and then haven't kind of scrapped it, been focusing on other stuff. Really want to get together the intro to Final Fantasy guide for everybody. I'll probably do a meta breakdown in the near future as well, since people seem to like the last one I did. But I kind of wanted to go over. We're more than a couple weeks into the 17th set, Rebellions Call. I kind of wanted to go and just point out cards that either are better than I thought, worse than I thought, somewhere in between. I'm on FFTCG. I've just got it sorted by Opus 17. I'm just going to kind of go over what catches my eye. Adelard is great. Probably a card if you're playing any fire decks, you should have a couple copies of in it. Edgar is fine. He's a little bit restrictive in some ways. I think it was someone mentioned that if he was a 3 CP 7K and got back one category 6 character, he'd be a lot better, just because it means that he doesn't die as badly to interaction on that. I really wish I liked the Fire Ice FF6 deck. I just kind of don't. It's not a ghoul deck at all, unfortunately, despite the fact I love the art and the characters. The amount of good mono art you can play in this deck is probably the highest in the game. It's just not a deck I enjoy playing. So, but this is really good support. Brought it kind of back where it's it's interesting, but I don't really think it's tier 1 or anything like that. Elf is good. If this thing was Earth, it would probably be almost strong enough to start needing to ban Avalanche cards, but Avalanche hasn't really needed a fire backup with Avalanche Operative. If they get an Earth Avalanche Operative that's not named Barrett, Biggs, or Jesse, that would be really scary. It's also a fun card to play with Maria, but it's really hard to not play Noctis in Avalanche. The Samurais are crazy. Really wild to see 3 new Samurais in the same set, or 4 new Samurais, all of which are quite playable. Probably the hero is the worst of the set, and honestly, just this cycle of heroes sucks. I think of these standard units, Samurai is probably the most playable, the second most being either Banon Guardsman or I think Red Mage has some incidental synergies in Scion decks, but honestly, these cards are not hero quality. This would be a solid rare. Scholar also, if turbo discard ever becomes a thing again, is okay, but I think right now the way discard's trending is perpetual discard and not turbo discard. People have kind of realized that paying once to continually attack the hand is better than paying big burst to attack the hand once and then give your opponent time to recover. Goblin is probably one of the only monsters here where anything that's 1 CP search for something is almost doesn't matter what you're searching, but this gets a backup. It gets a haste option that also draws you a card. You can kind of turbo through your deck, and then the action ability is just solid. It's good value. Xenos is fine. A little restricted to say character cost 4, but it's bad Cecil, but Cecil's good, so bad Cecil's probably solid. Bahamut is probably one of the best summons in the set. It's funny how they kind of just do this with just kind of inch up the damage that a fire summon does every now and then. So Opus 5 or 15, they did the 4 CP 9K. This is now 4 CP 10K. If you're not playing crystals, this is just the best card. I even like Steve brought up. It's kind of also 2 Brynhilders rolled into 1 card in a way, because you can do 5K to 2 different things. You combine this with any other kind of ping damage, and it kind of starts getting ridiculous. Probably one of the few really good summons in the set. The Bahamut package is cute. It's not horrible. It's not really one that I think is going to see a lot of serious competitive play. It's a decent package to tech into any Fire Ice aggro deck if you wanted to play it, get someone into the game more cheaply. But I think there's better ways to do that than the jet, the Winged Chaos package. Hien is good. I don't think he's game-breakingly good, but he's good. Sabin's cool. Very fun card. Doesn't break the game in any way. Mont Blanc, this thing is nuts. Especially, I think Lusso is one of the best. Ice weirdly got a lot of backup help this set. but Mont Blanc and not Lusso, Hurdy. The Hurdy card in the set is one of the best cards in the set, and Mont Blanc really helps with that. Going through, yeah, Scholar's really cool. If you can give this Umaro Brave, it's just crazy. Like, there's so many things you can do, because this, your opponent discards 2 cards, is not limited to your turn. So you can actually make your opponent just rip cards out of their hand on their turn, which is very hard to do. The downside is you have to turn off the Umaro Must Attack or give him Brave, which isn't super easy to do, or you have to like activate him on your opponent's turn. Like, there's lots of ways to do it, but making your opponent discard 2 cards on their turn is a little scary. Thankfully, this card I think has just enough restrictions and text to make it somewhat fair. We talked about Scholar. Edward is probably one of the other best. This is the best common in the set. This card is crazy good. This rate for removing a single card out of your break zone, you can basically just tell your opponent that if you know what deck they're on, you can stop them from playing the game with this card. Really, really strong card. Probably a 2 of in every ice deck that I would personally build for the near future. Curry Wazette. Interesting effect. Cool card. It's very high investment. Just not really going to see a lot of play because of it. But it's fun to see this effect exist. This Shiva, I think it's better than people give it credit for. But admittedly, it's going to be a bit format dependent. You need to see a lot of 2-cost forwards that your opponent is going to swing. But this is a card that you can make your opponent discard cards on their turn. That's just a lot more powerful than people give it credit for. Being able to hand rip on your opponent's turn is a very powerful effect. And the second effect says that Susano fails, and a lot of ice decks are relatively aggro. Like, you're either aggro or you're like molasses slow. If you're on the aggro side of ice, that's a good effect. It's just a matter of deck space and having it in hand and all that good stuff. Zayzat is really good if you can cheat it into play, and really mediocre if you can't. I'm a little surprised they actually gave it a restriction, because the immediate comparison is 3 CP Zidane, and like, if you play this at 4 CP, then it's still kind of worse Zidane. Still, it's targeted hand rip, and Ice hasn't had access to this effect, so I kind of like it just on the basis of that. The one other thing that scares me is that you can kind of, on the stack, when like Zayzat enters, if you have 4 cards in hand, or the minimum number of cards in hand to get the hand rip effect, so you have 3, he costs 4, you play him for 4, your opponent can just cast something to get a card out of their hand, which, sure, you're still sort of ripping cards out of their hand, but like, you're not paying 4 to make your opponent cast something. You really want to get that hand knowledge in that card rip. You can't do that if they play something on the stack. Setzer's cool. It's not like amazing or the coolest card ever, but it's cool. This Sarah is interesting. I've seen a lot of like people trying to build around this. It's been like the card people have been trying to break the most this set that I don't think really has seen a solid thing. There's a lot of really powerful text on the card and really cool effects. It's just a matter of, there's a little bit of a clash here. First of all, it's Job Moogle and not Name Moogle as well. A lot of your generic Moogle backups are Name Moogle. There are no Job Moogle multi-playable cards, because almost every multi-playable card is Job Standard Unit. So you have this weird issue where you want to play her down with 1 backup down, so you pay her at curve, which then means that you're locking one of your backup names out, so you have to play like a certain critical mass of Moogles, and there's not a lot of great Moogles. There's a lot of potential with this card, I think, even especially because there's a Moogle backup that says all Moogles are rainbow backups, so you can like run a mono Moogle backup line and play stuff like Fusoya, and Fusoya is a card that practically says you win the game if you cast them for 5 different colors. It's just a matter of how do you get this effect consistently, and the second effect is really good. I love cards like this that have an enter the field effect and an on-attack effect, so you get kind of perpetual value if your opponent doesn't deal with her. Dolphy as a character is crazy. It's really good. And then 4 backups make your opponent discard. Heck yeah. If they ever get another Moogle backup engine that's not Mont Blanc into Hurdy, this card is going to really start to skyrocket in value because you can start really getting those backups down quickly. Let's see. I think this white Tiger Glacial Quibney is a little slept on. I think it's relatively easy to keep your opponent's hand size low now. I guess this is like a 1F tech in Ice Earth. Haven't seen a ton of it. Turks. I'll get back to this when we talk to Sisney because I think she's the better card. Legendary Turk. The best part about this card is the job. I don't think there's too many situations where you would use the action ability, but also like it's not the worst action ability. You can do this to defend something if you have to. But this could be a vanilla 2CP 5K with C play. Dancer, I wish this card was better. There's no reason to pay 4 to reactivate 3 when you can pay 3 and reactivate 5. This does let you reactivate characters as opposed to backups, but let's be real, you're going to activate your backups. I know there's like some talk about like Dancers as a deck. I really like Steve's take on it. I tried to make it work at the start of the set. I really just don't think there are any good Wind Dancers. Like I almost would just go Water Lightning and play the few Water Dancers you have access to. Like I think the second best dancer other than Mayakov and Lilith is frickin' Bart's. And Pinello, the backup, is really good. So Onion Knight, I saw a lot of hype for this card early. I haven't seen it played very much. Gargos is sneaky good. This card doesn't seem like 2k power reduction, start of every battle phase, is enough to really be interesting. But the combination of that, and this is the one card I've seen work with Glaciela's special. But like this special just says to kill 2 small things for 2 CP. And Gargos also, like, being able to permanently reduce the power of stuff as long as Gargos is on field is like really good for a 2 CP forward. You don't need a high ceiling on 2 CP forward for them to be good. Kelker is funny because it's a big stupid beater in an element that doesn't really need big stupid beaters because everything else it does is good. If this was in like Lightning, it would probably see play. Like it's not a bad card. It's just why would you play this if you're playing Wind? Also, funnily enough, this would almost be a better card if it just cost 5 and always broke the 5 cost forward if your opponent controls or something. Because then it would actually work in Sophie Wall. But because it doesn't, I really don't. I would almost rather play Garuda than Kelger, given the choice. Thief is very funny. I hope this card is never good. Going on, Chocobo Summon, really good card. Very slept on. Being able to just dig 3 on an EX burst, pick the best card. You know, Yu-Gi-Oh! Pot of Duality is a very strong card. This is essentially Pot of Duality with no restrictions afterwards. Dario, I'll talk about when I get to Glaciela. I just don't really think this card is amazing. Typhon, this card is okay. It really helps the 0 cost action ability. So this is essentially kind of a 2 CP repeatable breaks on hate. Of note, the only way Typhon can ever die is if he dies to an EX burst. You can, no matter what, you can continuously reactivate this action ability to return Typhon to its hand in response to removal. So as long as he doesn't die to an EX burst, you essentially kind of prepay the 4 CP to get 2 CP back eventually. So like this card is good just because of that. I will say this is the worst name this card could have had because it is clashing with the best card in Wind, or one of the best cards in Wind, which is Typhon. Noelle is really cool and really good. Actually, like a shockingly fair card. Really cool it's cool because it's sort of anti-aggro, but doesn't function very well as anti-aggro because of the way it works. Very, very cool card. Love the way it plays. Super fun. One of my favorite cards of the set, to be totally honest. Pinello, one of the most disappointing cards of the set for me, honestly. There's a lot of really interesting and powerful text on this card, and I really thought it had a chance to be decent, but I really don't see a ton of cast happening at Dancers. I don't really see Storm decks trying to tech this in when there's a better rare in the set that exists. Like, it's nice that it's end phase so your opponent can't interact, and like, yeah, you can dull another Dancer. So like, both of these effects just don't really work together very well, with the minor exception of the Valid Force stuff that the Univalifor stuff that Steve D was messing around with. But like outside of that, this card really doesn't synergize very well with Dancers. It doesn't synergize well enough with Storm because it doesn't do anything on entry. And you really want your Storm cards to be either payoffs or engine pieces. And this is kind of lacking as a payoff, and it's not an engine card. Lusso, this card should not have been printed. It could have the first line of text on this card and still probably be okay if I'm being totally honest, as wild as that sounds. The problem with Lusso, and I'll probably talk about this in a future video, is kind of the problem with Mono Wind Storm. So for a long time, Storm decks would go out of their way to try to fit in Lock, and the reason was because Lock was a payoff that was worth casting a bunch of cards for. And Mono Wind always has had the ability to cast 10 cards in a turn, no problem. It's not even all that difficult. You can cast 7 cards and end with 3 in hand in Mono Wind. But when you cast those 7 cards, you weren't doing anything. You were kind of just spinning your wheels and doing nothing. Lusso just kind of gives you a reward for spinning your wheels and doing nothing while also being an engine piece, and that's just not okay. You really can't have an engine piece that's also a payoff. It's a little too good, and I don't even think, like, I would have liked to have seen this be an ore, because the fact that you do 8k and refill your hand when you do it is kind of unfair. I've even seen this cleave go off twice in a turn before, where you cast him for cast 7 and cast 9. Ludicrously powerful card. Borderline ban-worthy, but kind of highlights an issue that Wind is running into. Spoilers, I think Wind is approaching the point with reactivation that Ice was at with Discard when they had to ban Thaumaturge and Gesper. And I think it's a significantly harder problem to manage in Wind than it was in Ice at that point, because there's no clear candidates for really solid hits there. RCL is cool. Seen a lot less play than I thought she would, but it's a cool card. Titans really surprised me. This card is really good. Kind of this all your forwards gain 5,000 power. I know people saw this as a combat trick. Where this is really strong is in blanking your opponent's interactions. You can kind of, for 3 CP, pseudo Amaterasu / Mistdragon to survive. And then killing a 5 cost forward. Oop, I'm going to click through again. Or doing 9k to it. That kills a surprisingly large pool of forwards. Most notably, it kills Tenzin. So we got live editing done cheap. Apologies. Durando's really, really powerful. It's kind of the rebirth of 2CP Water Zidane, but like Earth style. I haven't seen a ton of him, but really, really cool, really interesting card. This Prish is really good. This Prish and this Monk backup are almost single-handedly responsible for bringing monks back into the fold a little bit. Matoya is solid. She's kind of a bad Mistdragon and kind of a bad Kusith and kind of a bad Shantoto, but the flexibility means this is a really good one-of card for any deck that's in Earth. As long as you can spare the 1 backup slot. Unfortunately, there is no way to break her. Shadow Lord, good, still weird. I like the card. It's nice to have an archetype killer type of board wipe. And I'm kind of liking taking intentional damage right now because so many decks are reliant on getting to specific damage thresholds and they're struggling to reach them because smart players are playing around it too much. But this damage 5 is just kind of annoying. If you have a good archetypal light dark card, Shadow Lord kills it off. I don't really like that this card almost has a downside. I guess that's probably a lore thing. I haven't played Final Fantasy 11, but there had to have been another way to kind of get that point across. Lise is interesting. I've seen her in Avalanche a little bit, but I've never seen an Avalanche player field her and resolve her effects. Kind of glad she's not Job Monk. It would be a little scary. Little sad she's not Job Scion at the 7th Dawn, but I get why. I know the lore. This red mage is okay. Again, it's just like these effects are fine, but you can get this effects for so much cheaper on a non-standard unit. It's like they like still tried to make them standard units, but they tried to make them heroes. Like it's a decent-ish card, but because it's a standard unit, they like didn't want to push the envelope enough. Aphmau is great. Aphmau is one of the best cards in the set. I remember someone saying like, well, she searches 2 backups, sure, but like the backups she searches are kind of I think people actually like Menajig is unironically okay, but it's not a card you would ever see play by itself. You'd have a named backup that does 2CP named backup that it's not multiplayable. It's 2CP with kind of an okay-ish action ability, but the action ability is actually okay because it gets 2CP 5Ks out of Brunhilde range. If you have a 3CP 8K, you can get them past Amaterasu. But the bar for 2CP backups is not very high, actually. I think a good example of this is the Crystal Gen backups that don't really have good effects, but because they generate a crystal in entry and they have somewhat passable break effects, they see play. Menajing kind of, to me, is the same way. Because it's in this puppet, what I call the Puppeteer engine, it's actually like not a bad card if you get it for free. And then Objang saw unironic play in stuff like Waltz decks to get back your Waltzes to discard. So like the floor on Objang is a 1CP lightning backup. So the backups you have pretty high floors as just generically decent cards, and sure they're relatively low ceiling, but Objang getting back a card for a special or a specific forward for an engine piece is like, if you don't need to play it immediately, is still really good. Even if sometimes you do just, okay, Aphmau, Menajig, next turn, Objang, get back a card. But just as often, you can kind of hold off on the Objang play for a little bit. Alize is great. This card, honestly, this card could see play in non-Scion decks. Damage 3, get back a Job Scion, so you need just one other Scion. I think you could probably just play Alize Y'shtola as a little mini engine. Y'shtola is just kind of I think the best mono lightning board wipe on her special, the Opus 16 Legend. Alize can kind of facilitate it by herself at damage 3. You can get back 2 copies of Y'shtola, play a second Y'shtola, and then dull the Alize, give Y'shtola haste, and board wipe immediately. But yeah, it's she's just solid. She becomes free if you have any other Scion, and if we get more Scions in the future, if we get like a Crystal Exarch / Grahatia or an Estinian Scion card, this card only can potentially get better over time. Ixion, really, really good. X-Death. This is kind of one of the other cards people have really tried to break this set, and it's really powerful. I kind of underestimated it a little bit. I thought it was a lot of work. One of my friends' big pet decks ended up with stuff like Shadow Lord to try to turn this on quickly and things like that. And honestly, you don't even need that. The thing that really stuck out to me on this card when I played against it that I didn't realize is I was like, oh, it's a build your own Neo X Death when it's got 20 characters or 20 cards removed from the game. It's 10k that removes a character at the end of your turn. But the end of your turn is a really key difference because X-Death has guaranteed backup hate because you can remove your opponent's answers in their forwards before proceeding to your own end phase. Neo X-Death, because it's your opponent's end phase, they now have time to kind of play around it and protect the cards they want. X-Death doesn't give your opponent that option, which I think makes it especially relevant and especially powerful. I've seen this card do really well in Earth Lightning, I've seen it do well in Earth Water Lightning, and I've seen it do well in Ice Lightning. Just all 3 of those, very, very good. Especially Ice Lightning, I think, is where this scares me the most, just because Ice Lightning is already very good at going quickly, turboing through the deck, trying to do quick things and lock your opponent out of being able to play the game. It's not hard to get 15 characters in the breakstone quickly in Ice Lightning. And then you'll need about 15 because your opponent should have at least a couple for you to remove as well when you play the X-Death. I will say I think it's funny people try to play stuff like Mistdragon with X-Death because he kind of fuels himself. Unless your opponent's on a super summon heavy deck. But if your opponent's on a super summon heavy deck, you're probably fine anyway. Or you just don't field the X-Death super early. I'll talk about Glaciela in a little bit. It's kind of the more relevant card. Sid's solid for a common. Man in Black's really strong, really cool card. Salir's a decent hero. She's not incredible. Cisne, Turks. I've said for a while that Turks really just needed more named Turks. They got them, so they don't have to play those bad copies of like Rude and Reno to give enough of a hit rate on Tseng. I don't know that that's enough to make Turks like a super strong deck, but it's definitely like definitely more interesting now, and it's better. Again, this could be a 2CP 5k, and it would be fine, but she kind of gets pretty big at damage 3. She can sort of be removal. You can discard, most of the Turks are like 3 CP. You can also potentially discard a Tseng, which you wouldn't want to do, but like, a 4 CP 7k nuke on entry is really not a bad card. Going on through Hooded Man. I get why every top player went Goo Goo Gaga over Hooded Man. I think he's a fine card, but I really don't like the investment needed to play him. I see stuff like Mono and Storm that does all this stuff for free. Like this is, and people are like, oh, playing extra copies of Kane and getting 4 backups down is not that much different than getting a named Yuna and a named Riku backup to enable your Pain, but I mean, getting 4 backups down is harder than getting 3 backups down, and there was a Pain that also got whichever Yuna or Riku you were missing, and Yuna was a card that would see unironic play had Pain not been in the format. A lot of times I see Hooded Man, I see people stretching for other copies of Kane and all this other stuff, and like sure the Wind one is fine, but then you're on like Wind Lightning, and why would you be on Wind Lightning when you could be on Wind Earth, Ice, or Wind Ice, or Mono Wind? So I think it's just in a strange position. I really just don't think this effect is strong enough when we have other cards. Like I would almost even rather just play something like an Alfino, which has no setup, draw 2, discard 1, and sure you don't have the haste or like any of the pressure, but like with no relevant job synergies or like the ability to activate because you need 4 backups for him to pay for himself, and Lightning, sure, Aphmau is crazy at getting 2 backups down. What are you pairing this with, I guess, is kind of my question. Like, is Wind Lightning Storm really going to be a thing? Like, it could after the Cloud releases in Opus 19, but that's 2 sets away, and I would almost rather just play Earth Wind and then just cheat in the Cloud with, or cheat the ICP, or the Lightning CP. Sorry. Hard to talk, talking very quickly, trying to get as much information because this video is already running longer than I wanted it to. Yugiri, very good card. You can play a backup, search this, search another backup. Kind of does similar things to what Cyan does for fire decks, except for lightning or wind lightning again, which, like, again, there's kind of a weird wind lightning synergy going on. I just don't really think the deck does all that much that's impressive that mono wind doesn't already do, or any of the other wind variants. This Dragoon, cool card. Glad to Dragoons having 6 Dragoon backups helps that deck a lot. Alfino, this is, for a card with such unassuming text for its like normal effect, this card is so much fun to play. Having kind of a pseudo Lena for 4 CP that also kind of helps cycle through your deck and can revive bigger things. This card's just very flexible at damage 5, and even at not damage 5, it's a 2 CP card that helps filter. There's also a weird thing where if you want to play a higher quantity of light dark cards, normally I would say play 1 light or 1 dark. When you play a card that allows you to discard cards for effects, you can be more careful or more happy playing extra copies of light and dark cards. So say I wanted to run 3 copies of Noctis in a deck, right? And I'm playing a water party attack deck. Well, the problem with running 3 copies of Noctis, you want to run 3 copies of Noctis because Noctis is such a good card, you really want to see that happen. Or you want to see him as often as possible. But drawing Noctis when you're not intending to cast Noctis sucks because Noctis no longer pays for your other cards. Alfino allows you to kind of turn those pseudo cards into CP if you need to play it. This is especially relevant in Scions because Oracle of Light is not always a card that's worth fielding. There are board states where playing Oracle of Light is really bad, and Alfino allows you to say, instead of being forced to get my Oracle of Light down because my Thancreds aren't in the break zone or I just don't have the combo set up very well, I can really dig further and I can get back that Oracle of Light later on if I need to. Really, really love this card. Don't know how much play it'll see outside of Scions, Water Lightning Scions, but it's for... There's no way it's a common, it's a rare, right? It's a rare. Okay, good. Yeah, for a rare, everything you could hope for and more. Love this card. Glaciela, I'm not gonna lie, actually a little disappointed by Glaciela. I thought this card would be better than it was, and that's not saying that it's not a good card. 3 CP, gain a crystal is kind of like being 1.5 CP, 7k, and the special is really, like, the text on this card is crazy. The problem is, she kind of fuels herself better than she fuels other things. So it's like, hypothetically, let's say we're going to run the Crystal Gen backups. We're going to get 1, maybe 2 of them into play. We're going to play Glaciela. Maybe, so she comes in, you have 3 crystals, right? So from there, you can then spend 6 CP in hand to just go machine gun, pow, 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 pow. Like, almost like a better Leviathan at that point, because you're not bouncing cards and giving your opponent resources to come back after you play your big power play, right? However, the whole idea of like, oh, you can use your crystals for other cards, well, then you have to play those other cards, right? And that's where things start getting iffy, because if the floor in Glaciela is like, she comes in off of 3 backups, she's a character herself, she does 8k, you have 4 backups and Glaciela, she does 10k, nothing lives at 10k ping. Those effects have to, like, it's like, what more is that effect going to do other than kill a forward? And a lot of them kill forwards. That's great. O refunds the crystal. But you're still paying to play the card. So, like, in the case of O, you're paying 4 CP to play the O plus the O in hand. You paid 6 CP to cheat the crystal cost to break a 4 CP character, but Glaciela just says, pay the 2 CP, nuke the character anyway. Why are you bothering with all this other stuff? So I kind of just think she functions by herself and doesn't need any other cards. I know that people were talking about, like, oh, well, Dario, you're just going to, machine gun off all these, like, these Nordstalins and all these other backups because there's no once per turn on it. And it's like, yes, but then you're playing Dario and you're not playing Bismarck. Like, if you're playing a 5 CP wind card after playing also a 3 CP water card that has just the biggest target on her back and she sticks around long enough for this combo to happen, you've won the game. You don't need to kill their backup lineup. That's kind of where I'm at with Glaciela. She's crazy. But none of this text that says the specials, this could just say you can pay crystals to use her own special. And this card would be almost identical with the exception of maybe Ramada. I don't know. Happy to be proven wrong. That's just kind of how I've seen this card play out in practice. I've tried it with Faisalas. I've tried it with Dario. Gargos actually does use her very well because Gargos doesn't have a additional cost to use his special. So it's kind of like, instead of using Glaciela special to nuke one thing really big, you could play Gargos for your 2 CP on her special and then just nuke a bunch of smaller cards. It's like the actual good combination, but again, how good is that really when you're playing Water Wind? Should you just be on Sky Pirates at that point? I don't know. Moving on. Talked about Glacial enough. Really powerful card. Get a playset of her, but get her because I think she's kind of like a repeatable nuke, and not because you're going to be like doing these really convoluted stuff with these other FFBE characters. Ellis is a really cool card. I wish that there was just an in-archetype way to reactivate her. Just kind of very strange card. Princess Sarah, this is a card that will eventually be good. Mark my words, if we get more cheap action abilities that can target your own forwards, I think like the one that comes to mind for me is currently Twins. In Twins, this is searchable off of Sarah. You can pop it down, and if you don't need to use Palom or Porum, especially Palom early on is only pinging for 2k, Princess Sarah can help turbo through your deck, get into better cards. And even Porum is funny because Porum can turn her off and let Princess Sarah attack. She forgets she can't attack. This card will be good eventually. Kind of the new water thing, by the way, is a 1 CP forward with above curve body that can't attack or block. It's the third set in a row they've done that. Moving on, Ramada's like, I think 3 Glaciela, 2 Ramada is just a package you have to consider if you're in water, especially if you feel like playing oracles, or like you can go a little further with like a Lena or 2. But just by itself, those 5 to 8 cards just kind of make most water decks relatively solid right now. The Smog is a cool card. Being able to cancel a search can be really powerful, and he does help you dig through your deck. Water tends to be very good at that. Minwoo is interesting. I'm glad it's a little bit expensive if you can't get the cost reduction. I do wish that you could, like, I almost wish this card was like cost 7, and then you could remove 3 different elements to make it 5k, 3k, 1k, or something. I guess no, 9k. Remove a summon, make it 7. Remove 2 different elements to make it I don't know. Like, it feels like there should have been a way to like modulate this a little bit in a way that would make sense. Yeah. Moving on. All the lights and darks in this set are really good. Make sure you pick up 2 Engelbert, 2 Maria, 2 Venera, and you need a playset of the Emperor. I'm sorry. Sucks to have to get a playset of a Legend, but you do. They do kind of different things for the most part, although I think Venera and Engelbert actually will go in a lot of the same decks. I think a lot of decks could do very well with the 2 Engelbert, or 1 Engelbert, 1 Venera line. So you play Engelbert early. If Engelbert doesn't fire the crystals before he dies, you play Venera. Venera becomes free, and then Venera can kind of do her thing. Maria is really fun for decks that are low on names for their jobs. You can kind of cheat like an extra Avalanche Operative or an extra Samurai into play. The starter deck sucks, I'm not gonna lie. Bygan is sort of decent-ish. Zemus is like sort of decent-ish. I've seen some people say like Edge is okay, but like the problem with Edge, I think, is you need a certain amount of Category 4 backups. So I think Edge really needs 3 Category 4 backups and Edge, and there's just not the critical mass of Category 4 backups to make that happen often enough for it to be comfortable playing them. This Kayn and this Rydia are probably the only 2 really good cards in the set. Rydia is crazy. This would have been really, really good if Mashri was still around, but even without Mashri, she's a 1 CP card, and you can kind of give your opponent a Sophie's choice of, do you want me to get the good summon, or do you want me to get the good summon? It also functions as deck thinning. I love using her. Show your opponent a Sildra, show your opponent like a 3 CP Leviathan, and say, hey, I'm going to draw cards, or I'm going to search 2 cards, right? Which one would you rather me do? Lots of really fun, interesting things you can do with this card. And then this Kayn gets back Rydia, and it gets back Porum. Anything that does that, it's a good card. So, yeah. By the way, if you ever build a cube, I think this Golbez is a really cool cube card. He's like, I think it's like a really fun card for like a sealed or low power environment. Just not really gonna ever see constructed play. Yeah, that's gonna do it for like the little quick set wrap up. Let me know if there's any cards I skipped over you want to hear about, or if there's any cards that you think I'm wrong on, or that I'm underestimating. Maybe this Kayn is the card that you think is like secretly super good, or maybe I'm sleeping on Hooded Man. Who knows? We'd love to hear about it. And hopefully in the near future I should have more videos coming out on a more frequent basis.